Over the next few days, the world will witness several announcements of very big achievements within the nuclear field.
Tensions between the Islamic Republic of Iran and the West have reached a crescendo following new revelations over Iran's nuclear program.
In Tehran, fuel assemblies for 20% enriched uranium made by Iranian nuclear scientists were loaded into the Tehran medical reactor in the presence of Iran's President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad.
As Iran continues to enrich uranium, Israeli leaders say they're preparing an attack on the country's nuclear sites.
We're determined to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons. We leave all options on the table, and containment is definitely not an option.
American officials are planning for a possible war.
We will not countenance Iran getting a nuclear weapon.
How did we get to the brink of a war with Iran?
Earlier, Iran's Vice President Mohammad Reza Rahimi warned that not a drop of oil would be allowed to pass through the Strait of Hormuz if sanctions are imposed on Iran's oil.
A fifth of the oil of the world goes through those straits. We're not going to allow them to block that.
What would a strike on Iran look like?
A military strike is an act of war. We will be at war with Iran.
Iran would strike back. There would inevitably be much collateral damage.
And is there a way out that doesn't end in violence?
Sanctions not only don't achieve their goals, they can also backfire.
Everybody talks about bombing, and the parties have dug their heels deep into the ground.
Find out next in a special Mosaic presentation of Iran and the nuclear threat.
Iran must be stopped.
If there's one thing that all parties can agree on, it's that Iran is expanding its program to enrich uranium. But the agreement stops at the question of Iran's intentions.
The reactor produces medicine for thousands of cancer patients. In Tehran, President Ahmadinejad criticized the Western powers for their attitude towards scientific progress of other nations.
I think that the greatest treason the West has committed against mankind is what they have done to science.
The United States and Israel both assess that Iran does not yet have a nuclear weapon, and we are exceedingly vigilant in monitoring their program.
Iran today has the technical, scientific, and industrial capability to eventually produce nuclear weapons.
So just what is Iran cooking up in its nuclear facilities? Journalist Jaco Versloos of Dutch television recently got unprecedented access to Iran's top nuclear ambassador.
Okay, this is the library. I want to show you the real centrifuge. This is one of the centrifuges from Natanz, a brand new one. I brought it to here, to the General Conference of International Atomic Energy Agency. You'll never be able to see the centrifuge and touch the centrifuge like this in any country, because even
This is Dr. Ali Soltanieh. He's the Iranian ambassador for the International Atomic Energy Agency. It's a UN agency supervising countries that work with nuclear energy.
And this is, by the way, the heavy water, the first heavy water made in Iran, 99.8% pure heavy water. Now, of course, we are producing tons.
The UN is putting pressure on Iran to stop its centrifuges and to stop making heavy water. They are concerned that Iran might be working on a nuclear bomb.
The European, I brought it to show the whole world that this is the centrifuge of Iran, and they have to cope themselves with the reality.
In 2002, inspectors with the International Atomic Energy Agency discovered that Iran was building an underground factory near the city of Natanz. Former IAEA inspector Robert Kelly thinks the facility could be part of an effort to produce a nuclear bomb.
This is Natanz, and this is where the centrifuges are. They're buried underneath here. They put something called a burster slab above them. It's a very strong, thick building, but then they put more earth, and then they put a concrete layer above that. So if somebody drops a bomb that's supposed to penetrate through the concrete and go off, the burster slab fools it into thinking it's inside the building and it blows up.
What is the significance of Natanz when it comes to Iran's alleged ambitions in trying to build a nuclear weapon?
Well, it's a huge factory, was designed to contain something like 50,000 centrifuges, which would produce far more enriched uranium than you can imagine them having any need for. So it's just, it's of a scale that only makes sense if you have a weapons program.
The discovery caused an international commotion. The UN Security Council discussed it and demanded that Iran stop enriching uranium.
Of course we will not do that. They said we are not suspending the construction and completion of heavy water reactor. Of course we will not do that, because we are having 1 million patients struggling with cancer, and they need radioisotopes. We have to speed up to complete this reactor to produce radioisotopes. Why shall we stop this reactor?
Well, this is a reactor that they say they've built for producing medical isotopes. My assessment is it's not a very good choice for medical isotopes. It's too big. It's located too far from hospitals. It was also being done in secret. The medical isotopes that you want to use to put into people have short half-lives. They decay quickly and they disappear. And so if you produce the medical isotopes hundreds of miles from where you're going to use them, then they might decay before you even get them to where you want. So you'd like to do this in something like the Tehran research reactor right in Tehran, where the biggest hospitals are likely to be.
The Iranian president Ahmadinejad has repeatedly refused to suspend the program. The boycotts and possible attacks on Iran are things he can live with.
Yes, some few Western countries, including United States, might, you're right, might use this as a pretext to put pressure on Iran. But shall I bow to the pressure, which is not right? Shall I lose the inalienable right? Shall I deprive my Iranian nation, Iranian generation, over 70 million Iranian from access to technology because of these sort of allegations? Of course we cannot do that. And in the history, my government and myself will never be forgiven to do such a mistake.
But could Iran in fact be lying? Could its nuclear reactors be designed to produce an atom bomb? Policymakers in Washington disagree.
They have a very robust enrichment program, both at the facility at Natanz and at the Fordo facility in the mountain at Galm. Both of those facilities were once clandestine facilities that were only outed and only became declared facilities under IAEA inspection once they were disclosed by others, not by the Iranians, which leads one to be suspicious about why that was. They have clearly done work in the past that's relevant to developing a nuclear explosive. So that's the bad news. I think that there's a lot of evidence that suggests that they are putting themselves into a position to make a decision at some point.
What are Iran's intentions? The IAEA, the CIA have said repeatedly that they don't believe Iran has made the decision to weaponize. There's a very interesting debate about whether Iran just wants to go to the edge of weaponizing. We don't know. How long do we have before they could choose to weaponize if they want to? There's a wonderful article that was written about a year ago noting that every 2 to 3 years, we confidently hear that Iran is within 2 or 3 years of having a bomb. And then another 2 or 3 years go by.
A lot of the timelines that people hear, 6 months to generate enough weapons-grade uranium for a bomb, a year to a crude testable device, or several years to an ICBM, makes it sound like 6 months from now, they're going to have enough uranium for enriched uranium for a bomb, and a year from now they're going to have a device, and a couple years from now they'll have an ICBM with a nuclear warhead on the top of it. But all of those timelines depend on the supreme leader in Iran making a final decision, a decision that we have no evidence that he's made, and we have every reason to believe we would detect if he did, because they could only enrich fissile material for a weapon if they used the declared facilities at Natanz and Qom. And because it would take them several months to do it, they would get caught by the IAEA.
As a signatory to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, Iran has the right to enrich uranium, but only for peaceful purposes. United Nations inspectors work to ensure that the country isn't developing a nuclear weapons program.
Iran's envoy to the International Atomic Energy Agency says Tehran does not rule out providing access to its military sites, including Parchin. Ali Soltanieh said access to military sites will be possible under a set of conditions that Iran has set for the IAEA to follow.
Some world leaders accuse Iran of stonewalling IAEA inspectors, but the agency's former Director General, Hans Blix, thinks the inspections can still work.
If they break out, the inspectors will be there. It's an alarm bell. We'll sometimes say the inspectors are like watchdogs. They will bark, but they will not bite. They will be thrown out. That's enough as a signal, of course. So one is not reassured by the fact that inspectors are there. Something could happen, but it may be in the Iranians' interest not to do so.
Others fear a repeat of the bad intelligence that helped to pave the way to the Iraq invasion of 2003. Former nuclear inspector Robert Kelly fears some of the evidence against Iran's nuclear program is illegitimate.
It looks a lot like the 1995 forgeries that were used to slow down the process in Iraq. So I just felt like speaking out and saying, I see things here that happened to me before, and I'd like to make sure everybody stops and looks before they leap. It's not that there isn't a program there, it's that the information that we're being given looks like it's been slanted, spun, and analyzed with a bias.
So did the IAEA include forged documents in one of its reports on Iran's nuclear program? Journalist Jaco Verslaus of Dutch television investigated that question.
Iran continues today to produce enriched uranium and heavy water. Not for a bomb, they say, but for cheap energy and for cancer medication. Israel and the US do not believe any of it. So who's right? The answer was supposedly supplied by the IAEA in 2009.
Iran heeft gewerkt aan een kernwapen. Ook zijn er in het geheim proeven gedaan die erop wijzen dat Iran bezig is een kernwapen te ontwikkelen. Dat staat in een voortijdig uitgelekt gedetailleerd rapport van het IAEA. Dat is het atoomagentschap van de Verenigde Naties.
But the IAEA's information was wrong, according to Robert Kelly.
I agree they might still be working toward the development of a bomb. That's clear. The report doesn't prove it. The few paragraphs that have information that is supposedly current are very weakly sourced. It's very difficult to read those and understand where the information came from, or if the information is accurate. And one of the paragraphs concerns information that is probably inaccurate. It's very easy to go back and see that that particular document is probably forgery.
This is the contested document. It's 2 pages long and written in Farsi, the language of Iran. The subject line reads, Neutron Initiator.
Neutron initiator is a little device that starts the chain reaction in a nuclear bomb. A nuclear bomb will not go off without this little pulse of neutrons that has to occur just at the right time.
What is it about? Okay, it's,
Well,
it's written about neutron. Okay, about neutron activities.
Is it authentic? Because some...
No, of course. How can I say it? You just give me a copy of things, typed in Farsi. Everybody in the whole world could go to Microsoft Word and the computer Word, and then just type out in Farsi. How can you prove that this is related to Iran? That is exactly good point you show me.
People suspect the current document is a forgery because of language, because of the way the Farsi language is used. It would appear that the report was not written by someone who's a native Farsi speaker. You would think that a genuine classified document from Iran would have been written by a native Farsi speaker. So there are choices of words, choices of phrases that just don't seem genuine to people who speak Farsi.
This is exactly, that's what I'm saying, that nobody can believe that these kind of things will be real. They are forged and fabricated. They just did it hastily, typing in Farsi, and just putting a signature, an emblem of the Minister of Defense. Of course, anybody could do it in a matter of seconds, and they gave to the agency.
Today, Robert Kelly continues to call for vigorous inspections of Iran's nuclear sites, while warning against an attack.
The big difference now is that IAEA is in Iran. They're looking at all of these facilities that are part of the potential breakout, of the potential problem, and they're there looking at it. We want that to stay that way. And the worst thing I can imagine right now is doing something short of war that causes the Iranians to kick IAEA out. That would be a disaster.
Experts say the most likely scenario is a series of airstrikes from the Middle East's only nuclear-armed nation, Israel.
The biggest risk of military action in the near term is an Israeli strike. This would be an extraordinarily complex endeavor involving dozens and dozens of aircraft traveling more than 1,000 miles to their targets.
I think this year, 2012, is likely the year of decision for Israel on this issue, mainly due to the continued dispersal and hardening of Iran's nuclear program. In particular, the commencement of enrichment operations at Fordo, at that enrichment site, the centrifuge enrichment site near Qom. And I think from their point of view, they look at this and say that time may no longer be working in their favor, and they may be reaching a point in which deferring military action means foregoing military action altogether.
Iran is an evil, cruel, morally corrupt regime. It is based on destruction. It is an affront to human dignity. Iran is the center, the sponsor, the financier of world terror. Iran is a danger to the entire world, not just Israel. Iran's ambition is to control the Middle East so it can control a major part of the world economy. It must be stopped, and it will be stopped.
Some Israeli officials call an Iran with nuclear weapons an existential threat. Some U.S. commentators, such as Dennis Ross, who recently left the White House National Security Council, have asserted that stable nuclear deterrence between Israel and Iran is impossible, suggesting that there would have to be some sort of military action to prevent Iran from becoming a nuclear weapons power. Others, and that includes the current and the last head of the Mossad, oppose military action against Iran, in the words of former Mossad chief Meir Dagan, as stupid. These Israelis seem to believe that sanctions, along with a kind of shadow war that we've seen of assassinations, sabotage, cyber attacks, are sufficient to retard the Iranian program, and that a full-scale war would actually be a remedy that is worse than the disease.
I mean, if you envision an Israeli strike, you're really talking about one day, several hours of one day, a series of strikes on about a half a dozen targets, and then all of those planes are going to race back to Israel to defend Israel against the inevitable retaliation from Hezbollah, the possibility of this widening into a conflict in Gaza or involving Syria, so it's a strike.
The United States hasn't ruled out an attack of its own against Iran.
The United States has the capability to conduct a campaign. We already have more forces in the Gulf pointed right at the Iranians than we have pointed at the nuclear North Koreans. There are 40,000 forces in the Gulf. There are another 100,000 on Iran's eastern flank. And the United States has intercontinental capabilities.
What we really would be talking about is the start of a war, a major assault, for a number of reasons. The nature and dispersal of the nuclear facilities that would be the ostensible target. We're not just talking about a reactor here or a building there. There would inevitably be much collateral damage, and not least of all are the U.S. operational requirements, which U.S. military planners would insist on, which would include, among other things, suppression of Iranian air defenses and so on.
We do not have nuclear weapons, and we will not build them. But in the face of aggression from our enemies, whether from America or the Zionist regime, to defend ourselves, we will attack on the same level as our enemies attack us.
An attack on the Iranian homeland would be the one circumstance that would motivate Iran to respond zealously. Iran's specific responses probably would include terrorism through its own agents, as well as clients and proxies such as Lebanese Hezbollah, other violent reprisals against U.S. forces in the region, and disruption of the exports of other oil producers. This has obvious implications for the U.S. homeland with regard to terrorism. Regional political consequences would include a fresh round of anger at the United States for what would be widely seen as unprovoked killing of Muslims, with everything that such anger entails in terms of stimulating still more extremist violence against the United States. In return for all of these effects, an attack on Iran would not even achieve the objective of a nuclear weapons-free Iran. Only a ground invasion and occupation could hope to do that, and no one's talking about that immense undertaking. Then there are the economic consequences of a U.S.-Iranian war, which are literally incalculable, and I will not try to calculate them, but they are likely to be immense.
Experts say those consequences could be dire. Each day, about 1/5 of the world's oil moves through the Strait of Hormuz. Oil industry insiders warn of a shock to world energy markets.
It's very important we understand that the world oil market is integrated. It's fully integrated. You cannot isolate production from Iran from what happens to the world price of oil. We have to accept that there will be a cost on us as well. If you can shift the long-run price of oil, the world price of oil, by $20 a barrel, the present value savings to the United States economy is $1 trillion. It's a colossal number. So any strategy which tries to impose a set of sanctions which cause abrupt and both current and abrupt shift in expectations of longer run production from Iran also imposes a large cost on the United States. We have an integrated world oil market. We can't get away from that. A supply disruption anywhere is a disruption everywhere.
President Barack Obama refuses to rule out an attack on Iran, but he has stated repeatedly that international diplomacy and tough economic sanctions may be enough to keep Iran from building a nuclear bomb.
Now the international community has a responsibility to use the time and space that exists. Sanctions are continuing to increase. And this July, thanks to our diplomatic coordination, a European ban on Iranian oil imports will take hold. Faced with these increasingly dire consequences, Iran's leaders still have the opportunity to make the right decision.
But will sanctions work? And who stands to lose the most under a sanctions regime?
Sanctions not only don't achieve their goals, they can also backfire. And the best example of backfiring in the case of Iran is how, through the banking and other sanctions, we pushed the Iranian central bank and the Iranian government to buy gold between 2007 and 2008. And those of you following gold prices know that since 2008, gold prices have gone up about 60%. So we have created actually a windfall for the Iranian government as a result, and they are very thankful for that. You know, they say that in different meetings that these gold acquisitions were actually a result of sanctions. Otherwise, Iran was always keeping hard currency reserves in external banks. We all know the sanctions have missed their actual objective. You know, I think there is not a lot of debate there. We also know they have undermined the Iranian economy. In my view, they are alienating the Iranian stakeholders about US policy. If 10 years ago you had a group of Iranian politicians, business people, and others who very vehemently argued in favor of relations with the US and in favor of a better relationship with the US, those people are being alienated day by day. And they are basically overshadowed now by the more hardline position, which says, it doesn't matter what we do, the Americans are going to sanction us anyhow.
The one way that you convince Iran to build a nuclear bomb and simultaneously set back any hopes that the democratic opposition movement can succeed is by attacking Iran. This is across the board the views of the people who are actually inside of Iran, who were part of the Green Movement, who are part of the human rights movement. They've all said that an attack on Iran would, in a lot of respects, do what the attack, the Iran-Iraq war did, which was enable the regime to consolidate its power.
So what is the way out of the crisis? As world leaders pursue sanctions and threaten war, Hans Blix has a radical long-term solution: a nuclear weapons-free zone in the Middle East.
That, I think, is a zone not only free of nuclear weapons, but also free of fuel cycle activities. That is, say, enrichment and reprocessing, because these are the activities that make the bomb-grade material. Now, that's a much bigger thing, and the parties in the Middle East will have to come together with that. The advantage of it is for the Israelis, that if you don't have any enrichment and reprocessing in the region, commitments there won't be any, then they will not have to fear Saudi Arabia or Egypt or Turkey or anybody else in the future. And the advantage for the Iranians will be, yes, they will get the credit for eliminating Israeli nuclear weapons.
But any such nuclear weapons-free zone is a long way off, and getting there would require a restoration of diplomatic ties between the United States and Iran.
It's important that we're mindful of the political situation within Iran, because just like in Washington we have, gridlock, and we have a president who came to office saying he wanted to negotiate with Iran, and he took a lot of political hits for that, and now he's being accused on the campaign trail of being an appeaser because he sat down with the Iranians twice. We have the same phenomenon in Iran, where when an Iranian political leader chooses to sit down with the United States or makes some sort of attempt at inroads towards a deal on the nuclear program, it becomes subject to this political back and forth, and it can be very risky for them.
The debate over Iran's nuclear program continues online at Link TV's website. Visit linktv.org/Iran-US Relations. There you can watch extended programs, catch up on the latest news, and add your voice to the discussion. That's linktv.org/Iran-US Relations.
Airwaves, a global channel of uncompromising stories, world news, documentaries, entertainment, and culture. Link TV, connecting you to the world. For more information, visit linktv.org.